Hello and welcome to another episode of the Seraphine Podcast. I'm Serafina Rocha, and today I have Chloe Elise with me. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk today.
I know, right? So is Chunk. I just punched him in the face. I think I was so excited. So welcome. So Chloe, you are the CEO of the Deeper Than Money, basically financial literacy company. Is that what it is?
Yes, exactly.
That is so badass. And you have a podcast, which I have been listening to since I've met you to kind of prepare for this interview. And also realizing, girl, you got your shit together. At 43, I'm sitting here and I'm like, one of the first ones that really hit me was, I think you had 5. You do really good, like 5 things, tangible things that we can hold on to. And it was, how to save money, and it was with my Apple iTunes and just checking like how many different little apps that I'm paying for. And I was like, what? So anyway, thank you for that, because I already saved some money thanks to this woman. But anyway, I'd love you to just first of all kind of give your own little introduction about, not little, big introduction, because this woman at age 23 made her first 6 figures. Let me tell you that again. Age 23, 6 figures. So, how'd you do it?
Oh my gosh. Well, a big dream and a little naive vision that I could do it. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate what we think we need to be able to achieve our goals. And so for me, I was in college, I was the broke girl, right? I would swipe my debit card until it got declined. And that's how I was like, okay, I can't spend until I get paid again. That was kind of my financial health. That's where I was at. And I knew something had to just give up, right? I knew something needed to change. And so at that point, I went on a journey to figure out finances, and I struggled finding who to listen to, how to find good advice for, at that time, 19-year-old. And after struggling and finally figuring out the way, I paid off $36,000 of debt in 18 months at 21. And at that moment, I realized that how transformational it was going to be, not only for me at that moment, but for the trajectory of my life. And from that moment, not only was I so inspired to go and show other people how to do it, but I also just had this naive vision that I could do it. And I knew that I didn't know all the things about business or all the things about this, but I knew that I could figure it out. I would YouTube stuff. I would Google things, and I would just ask a lot of questions, and I would fail in so many different ways until it worked. And then I'd say, okay, I'll take that road. And then I would keep going until something else failed, and then I would tweak it and keep going. And so it's been so cool to see that. But I think so often people have this idea that, oh, it's too hard, so I'm not even going to try. And so, but them not trying is the result of them never accomplishing it.
What blows my mind is that, so you're Generation Z, is that correct?
I'm right in the middle. I'm technically a millennial, but Gen Z is like the year before me, or around there.
Which is kind of cool, because Gen Z's got a little better rap than millennials. Mm-hmm. What blows my mind, because I'm from Generation X, so we're talking like Ethan Hawke, Winona Ryder, Reality Bites, Pearl Jam. That's me. That was my high school. That was my college. And it's not that we don't have really successful people in my generation. My husband is a mover and a shaker. For me, it took a little bit more to kind of get into this, like, where do I fit in? I'm going to ask you this. How are you not distracted? Being young, right? And you've got your phone in front of you. You've got all this stuff that's flashing in front of your face of being an influencer, right? How do you not just get lost in the tunnel? Mm-hmm. And how do you pull yourself out of it to do what you've done at your age? The maturity that you convey to me is off the charts. So talk to me about where you think that came from.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that I create more than I consume. always. And so if I'm going to spend an hour on social media or something, I'm going to make sure I'm spending at least 2 hours creating content. And I think a lot of people go to social media or go to other people for inspiration, but then sometimes they get overwhelmed. They're like, well, they already did that, or they already said that, or she already did that. And so the biggest thing is that I always create first. Not only do I create more, but I create first. And so I think the biggest thing that allows me to do is to make sure everything that I'm creating is 100% authentic to me and my business, right? It's not repurposed from what other people are doing. It's from my own life and experience and training and things like that. So, and I think also just being very vision focused, like laser focused on my big vision. And so I might have, and I'm Enneagram 7, so I'm like all over the place, right? I'm like, I have 100 visions. But the biggest thing is that I'll choose one and I will go after it until it's done before I go to the next thing. Always.
I mean, like for me, you blow me away. And I think it's because I just now at 43 am finding my stride. And what I do love, and I want to go back to that, you said something very, very mature. And I think that people need to hear it, is that when you look at the influencers, or you look at people that maybe you look up to, right? And you're like, well, it's already been done. I can either be like the poor man's version of it, or I'm going to be a copier of it. But what I found is one of my yoga instructors talked about remixing. And I love this. My dog is so funny. He's like, I'm remixing the furs you're sitting on. Remixing being taking your own authentic energy and looking at the information that's out there and making it not your own, but making it something that is an elevated version of something shared. And I think people are really afraid about not being like the great idea that no one ever had. Like, entrepreneurs take an idea and they just add to it, or they take it a different spin on it, and they actually reintroduce an idea that's already out there. So I loved your episode on imposter syndrome. Oh my God. I mean, it's something that I feel, again, at age 43, you'd think I'd get over it. And no, God, decades of years of, all right, I did it. When did you first feel it? I felt it being the new girl in school, because I came from no money when I was younger. And my dad was an entrepreneur, and we just were always paycheck to paycheck. And every time we would move. And every time I was a new girl trying to play this role of like, who's going to like me? And then I think it just kept going on and on in my life. So how did you feel it? And I know people have different versions of it. So talk to me about your imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so I heard of imposter syndrome for the first time when I was after college. I was reading the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, which I highly recommend. And it was this aha moment for me where I was like, wait, this is a thing other people feel too? There's not something wrong with me. I just always thought that I truly was a fraud, right? And I think for me, once I knew what it was, I could go back and think when even being in like middle school and getting a good grade and not wanting to show the person next to me because they said, hey, I got an 85, what did you get? And feeling like, oh, well, I got a 96, but I didn't deserve it. Like, and so saying, well, I got this, but it was probably just a fluke and she probably just gave this to me. And it wasn't like, I just guessed, right? Downplaying myself because I don't deserve that. I'm a fraud. Instead of just owning that, no, this is what I got. This is what I worked for. This is what I studied for. And so even as early as, I don't know how old you are in sixth grade, 13, 11 till 13. Yeah. And, but really feeling that throughout my life, and especially when I started, making my own business, I felt it constantly, and to the place where it was almost paralyzing. Like I would post on Instagram or tell someone about it and they would go, what are you doing? And immediately I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm quitting. Goodbye. It's over. I'm never doing this again. Yeah. Because I felt I had this like deep insecurity of who am I to do this, that then when someone else would breathe into that place, it was like game over for me, right? Yeah. It was just, and especially because who are the people that really give you their opinion? The people closest to you, right? Yeah. Like someone on the street likely is going to say, oh, good for you. But your closest friends and your family and your partner, likely they're the ones to say, what do you mean you're going to start a business? What do you mean you're going to go and do this? What do you mean you're going to go pay off that debt or do this? And it hurts the most coming from people we love. It hurts the absolute most. And so the biggest thing that I tell people is, first of all, if it's on your heart, I truly believe you're meant to do it. Like my belief is that God doesn't put things on your heart that you're not meant to go and do, and you're not meant to go and achieve. And so if it's on your heart, it isn't stupid. It's not a fluke. Like you're meant to go and do it. And the second thing is that you have to believe in your dream more than other people do. Right? Like we want other people, when we have this idea, we have this dream, like we want someone to come and be like, yes, it's $1 million idea. You're going to do this. But likely they're going to come and say, well, like, here's why I think that might not work, or here's why I think that might not work. And it breathes into that place of insecurity where you're like, oh, you're right. Like maybe they are right. Maybe this is stupid. And so that's the biggest thing, is that when you have that dream and that vision, you have to be all in for it, even if the people around you aren't.
I love that answer. And I also feel like you have such, your energy is contagious. I mean, from the moment that I met you face to face, I was like, wow, there's this woman with this energy and this, like I can tell you believe in everything that you're saying, which is so interesting, because the other thing is even the intonation of your voice is passionate. I can't tell you how many young people today do this like thing and they're like, yeah, I give no fucks and whatever, and I'm an influencer. And I'm like, are you taking yourself that seriously? Are you that cool? Because at the end of the day, you're not stirring a bone in my body. If anything, I'm rolling my eyes and being like, if I could hear 1 ounce of enthusiasm, 1 ounce of belief, at least fake it till you make it, right? But too cool for school just does not work for me. So when you're talking about this, we're in COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're in the riots. Mm-hmm. And then you're white and you're blonde. And you have a podcast called Deeper Than Money.
Yeah.
How the hell are you feeling right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's a crazy time, but I think that it's such a beautiful time too. I always like my big thing is that you can ignore your finances when things are easy and you can't when they're difficult, right? They kind of come and smack you in the face. And the reason for, I own a financial literacy company, but the name of it, Deeper Than Money, is because it's so much more than what's in your bank account. It's so much more than, what debt you're able to pay off. It's about, why do you want to be wealthy? What do you want to go and do with that? And I think a lot of people, with what's going on in our world and all of these things, my hope and my wish is that it stirs up some fire in you to go and become wealthy, because when good people become wealthy, they can go and do great things. You can use your money to go and change things. You can use your money as your vote and as your power to go and do stuff. And I think so often it's almost like, well, if you want to be wealthy, that's greedy or that's selfish. And if you think about a cause or an issue that you're passionate about, and I were to ask you, what can you do for that cause or for that issue or for that charity or nonprofit, what can you do for them with $0 in your bank account? You can probably volunteer a couple hours if you have the time, but what happens if you have $1 billion in your bank account? What can you do for them? What can you go and do for big brothers and big sisters? I know you're passionate about that nonprofit. What can you give for them? What opportunities, what lives can you impact? And so that's why it's so important to me to not only build wealth for myself, but also teach others to build wealth so they can not only have their own voice, but they can have the bank account to back that up.
Totally. And not judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Because I do think now is this weird shifting, right? And the imposter syndrome comes in because immediately there's a stereotype of white, blonde, privileged, deeper than money. And it's like, oh, honey, if you knew my story.
Yeah.
And if you also know that I am open and I want to help underprivileged kids know, like, hey, this is what it looks like, you know, to start at a young age, to start to think about money. So guess what? Just like me, I want to be better and grow than my parents were. My parents were great, but if I was the same exact version of them, then you know what? Nothing would change and there would be no progression and we would no longer evolve.
Yeah.
And I think what ends up happening is people get stuck and all they know is their little bubble.
Yep.
And they feel safe in that bubble and they repeat a pattern that's like, well, that's what mom and dad said.
Yep.
And my parents are great, but they literally shit their pants when I showed them the trailer to the podcast. And my father's like, you put up the middle finger. And he's like, that is a sign of hate. And I was like, Dad, my middle finger, number one, is broken and I pulled it off for this shot. And number two, it is saying fuck the stereotypes, fuck the world right now for shitting on certain cultures. Fuck, like, and again, the little girl in me that has that imposter syndrome of like, well, I wanted to be a movie star when I was a little girl. I wanted to be a ballet dancer. And my parents were like, that's not practical. You need to do what we do. I think that's the beauty of what you just said a few minutes ago about you have to be your biggest advocate and you've got to go after your dreams. Have you had any pushback or have you had any challenging moments within this time on your platform, just talking about finances, money? Have you, what's been your learning curve? Because trust me, there's been a lot for me.
For sure. I mean, and there's always, I'm so grateful for the community that I have. I'm so grateful. And 99% of the time, the people in it are incredible. And I like to think that my goal is to be polarizing to people who are negative, polarizing to people who are hateful, polarizing to people who are, so I don't have a lot of those people following me, right? Good. Bye. I don't want you here. But of course there's always that, that one person that comes in and I'll make a post on here's how to, pay off debt. And they'll say, well, it's easy if you have a trust fund. I'm sure daddy gave you a trust fund, right? Commenting things like that. And, it's one of those things where it's like, that says more about what's in their heart than anything about me. And this is such a simple example, but I think it's so easy to get hurt from other people's comments and other people's disgust towards you. And I think the biggest thing is that just knowing your truth. Like if that comment said, 3 + 3 is 10, I'd be like, well, they're wrong, right? But if they say that, I'm immediately like, well, is something wrong with me? Should I do this? And it's like, I have to know my truth and that that's not true and that I know who I am and I know what I'm doing and I know that I'm in my power to where that doesn't faze me in the same way that if somebody commented 3 + 3 is 10, because I know that's not true either. So really just standing in who I am and having my reason for why I'm doing this be so much greater than anything someone could throw at me.
What's your advice to people who are like, I'm flailing. I don't know who I am. I don't even know where to begin. All I can do is just kind of go in and try to make ends meet. Maybe they have a shitty job that's nowhere. They feel like they have no time for themselves. Maybe they're a single mom, or maybe they're a guy who is literally like he has his parents dependent on him. I've seen so many people like that where their hearts are so big and they're so great, but they're stuck. What's your advice?
So I truly believe that we do know what we want to do and who we are, but we grow up and people's expectations are piled on top of us, and it gets muddy. It gets foggy. It's like, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. And because we're saying, I don't know what I want to do with these constraints. Like, I don't know what I want to do with the fact that my parents told me that I couldn't go and be a movie star. I don't know what I want to do since this person told me I wasn't smart enough to go to college. I don't know what I can do based on all of these things that other people decided for you. And so the biggest thing is to ask, and a lot of times it takes some like deep journaling and some deep stuff. And it's like, what would I do if I didn't have to make money? Like, what would I do if I was completely set? What would I do? Like, what is on my heart to go and talk to people about? What do I talk to my friends about? What do I talk to my parents about? What do people come to me and ask for help? And because I believe we all have that thing inside of us, but it's just covered by all this bullshit from other people. And so, I mean, that's absolutely like my biggest piece of advice. But also, I completely recognize that when you're in a survival mode with finances, like you have to go from survival to thrival to surviving to thriving to start having those conversations. If I'm telling this advice to someone and she's like, I can't even put food on my table for my kids. Like, I don't care about my purpose, right? I don't care about my purpose right now. The biggest thing I would say is just getting a real look at where you're at, getting a real look at what your goals are, and asking for help to get there if you need that. So if you sit down and say, okay, we have this much money and we need this much money to be okay every month, instead of saying that's not possible, period, that's not possible, start asking yourself, how could we make this work? Do I need to advocate for myself and ask for my student loan payments to be decreased for a while? Do I need to advocate for myself and ask for a raise at my job that I haven't gotten a raise for in a while? Do I need to ask for any, funding from a local organization that's helping people like me, or whatever that may be? But really just looking at the numbers, because a lot of times the biggest fear is not knowing. A lot of people will say, I'm struggling, I need more money. And I'm like, how much more? And they're like, well, I don't know, I just need more. And I'm like, more isn't a real thing, right? More isn't real. Tell me you need $700 a month more, because when we put a name to it, we can start to create it, right? We can say, okay, that's this many more hours at my job, or if I got a raise, that's this many hours, or that would be if I sold this many things on Facebook Marketplace, like whatever. We can put a goal to that, but it's so much harder to do when it's this like up in the air thing of, I don't know what I need.
I mean, I literally, like when I'm sitting here, it's so interesting to have words resonate with you, and I'm usually ready to jump right in. It's always a ping pong match with me. And what I find with you is that, again, when I think about tangible information, enthusiasm, passion, I sit and I pause, because I'm like, it's in my head and I'm like, all right, how am I digesting this? You're kind of in a junk conversation when you're already thinking of the next thing to tell them about yourself. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing that I've been learning through this podcast, is how much I have to learn. And listening is so important. And also like sitting with things. Mm-hmm. I think so many of us are in a rush and we're so busy being distracted by things that when you take time to listen or to focus and get away from all the bullshit, the phones, again, no offense to Netflix. I love you, Netflix. I'd love you to have my show on it. But in the next breath, it's like you got to take not a moment to not Netflix and chill, but like chill in your soul and chill and be here. Mm-hmm. Because life is passing us by. And the one thing that's going to happen for sure is we're all going to die at some point. And I think that that's the other thing that's so interesting when I hear you talk about finances is it's just this thing that we let have power over our life, and it takes away so much joy. And if we just had a little bit more money, all of these great things that you can actually do for others and do for yourself to keep you healthy and wealthy of spirit and mind. So if you were going to talk to people who right now are unemployed, and you're going to give them advice about making money or start to put brainstorming, bringing out that journal or that notebook, what are things that you think are questions that they can ask themselves, and advice where you're like, hey, have you ever looked at this or that to take that talent to maybe make money off of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm huge on monetizing things that you A, enjoy, or B, you're already doing. And I think so often we're so in our lives that we don't even think about stuff, right? We don't think about stuff. And I challenge my clients to, one, put a name to it. Like, regardless of if you're unemployed or you just need more money or whatever, what amount do you need? What amount of money do you want to start making per month or whatever? So write that number down. And then when it comes to what you want to do in order to hit that number, there's two ways, right? You can either decrease expenses or increase your income. And a lot of times, this is where I disagree with like most financial gurus, but when it comes to decreasing expenses, I want you to do it in a way that doesn't impact your life, like it doesn't impact your lifestyle. Most people are overpaying for car insurance. They're overpaying for their, cable bill. They're overpaying for all of these different things. And they never stop to ask about it because it's normal. It's just in there, in their normal routine. And so again, advocating for yourself, calling, like this is a little example, but for car insurance, there's a free website. It's called thezebra.com. You go there, you type in your information, and it will tell you what you should be paying for car insurance. And if you're paying way more, call and say, hey, this is what the average is for this area. Would you be willing to match that? Lower your bills, right? That's more money for you to be able to use other places. On the other side of that, we have increasing your income and just asking yourself, how do I want to make that money? The biggest thing that I tell people is stop asking yourself disempowering questions. Stop asking yourself. If you're looking in the mirror and you're like, oh, do I look like shit? The response to that is not empowering, right? The response to that is never good. If you look in the mirror and you're like, does my ass look phenomenal? That is an empowering question. And so we do that same thing with our finances or with money or with work. And we're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to make that. That's not an empowering way to go about it. And so, and I get it. Like, you can be upset about where you're at. You can feel all the feelings, but know that from the pity party, growth doesn't happen there. So throw the pity party, feel all the feelings. And when you're ready to move forward, sit down and say, how can I make this work? How can I make that money? What can I go and do? And better yet, bonus points if it's in a way that feels really good and exciting for me. If you are a teacher that got laid off, how can you create a business that you tutor kids online so their parents don't have to homeschool them because their parents don't want to? Maybe, there's definitely parents out there that don't want to be homeschooling. If you are someone, use the skills you already have. I have a client recently who she is a real estate agent and just was having some like lulls because she wasn't showing houses, whatever. She's like, I really want to make more money. And I'm like, well, how do you want to do it? And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm like kind of over it because I don't want to go deliver pizzas. I don't want to go do this. And I'm like, well, you don't have, what would be a good way to make money? Like, how would be an ideal way? And she said, well, I love making these macrame plant hangers. I love doing that. I'm like, well, then make them and sell them. And now she's like pumping them out. We redecorated our apartment. We have a couple of them. They're gorgeous. And she's like, I can't keep up with the orders. She's just killing it. And so really asking yourself, how much do I need? How do I want to go and do that? And what effort, what to-do list do I need to start implementing in order to get there? And that could also be like your resume, right? If you want to go and apply for a different job, what do we need to tweak on your resume? What do we need to tweak on your cover letter?
Totally.
Things
I remember
like that too.
My resume. I mean, I was like, it was a resume for a job I didn't want.
Exactly.
I'm like, and it's crazy how words have so much power.
Yeah.
Words have so much power. And you're so right. Asking her, it's not what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
What do you like to do? And let's figure out a way to make money off of it.
Exactly.
So I want to know if you were going to have dinner, I love this question. Yeah. 3 inspirational people. And again, a lot of people like think a little too deep and they're like, Mahatma Gandhi, which would be amazing. I would love to meet Mahatma Gandhi,
mm-hmm.
but dead or alive, 3 people that have inspired you, helped you
mm-hmm.
become the Chloe Elise you are today. And where would the dinner be?
Oh my gosh, this is such a hard question. Okay, the first person who came to mind was Tony Robbins, because I love his stuff. I love it's one of those things where he's one of those people where you listen to his stuff and you hear it, but you also feel it. Yeah. Like you feel it.
He's a powerful man. I actually worked indirectly through him, and he's been criticized over the years, like any kind of, I loved his Not Your Guru on Netflix.
Oh, so good. I cried. I was like sitting in my living room.
But he's one of those guys who, correct me if I'm wrong if you think this, he's somebody who I think in the beginning, like we all are, that imposter syndrome of like, he believed it, but like he had his moments, and now he's done it for so long and he is it.
Yeah.
Like he's crazy. I love that. And sorry I interrupted.
I love it. Okay. I feel like this is like a cliche one, but it would have to be Oprah.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, my third one, this is so crazy. For my third one, I think that I would probably do my grandpa, who passed away when I was younger. So I would I was like 6 or 7. So I have memories, but I would love to be able to do that. And where?
Anywhere. Like you can make a fantasy of like on top of the Eiffel Tower in a jungle.
Yeah. I feel like definitely on a yacht, anywhere. Because, on a yacht, like I feel like if it was anywhere else, they could easily leave. Yeah. They'd be like, oh, after dinner, bye. But a yacht, it's like, they're staying for a while. They're staying for drinks, right?
They are.
So you'd have them,
right?
Exactly.
I love it. Now talk to me about your girl crush, like fashion, beauty, like you can't help but be like, I want to look at her pictures.
Oh my gosh.
I want to read about her.
I have so many. This one she's heavily criticized, but I totally still have a girl crush on Rachel Hollis. I think she's amazing. And gosh, I have so many. I have a girl crush on you. I think you're phenomenal.
And I have a girl crush on you. I'm like, how did I not have my shit together at 23 and make 6 figures? Because I think what was I doing? I think I was working at Morningstar Communications and PR and doing Progressive Auto Insurance, which was like, I loved Eric Morgenstern. Shout out to the Morningstar crew. But oh my God, no, I was like in theater and broadcast journalism, and you do things because you think you have to.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So girl crush more. Give me more. Like or a fashion crush.
Oh my gosh.
I love to hear these.
I'm like very I'm so bad at fashion stuff. I love We Were What. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of her like real name right now, but I love her page. Her story is it's Danielle. I forget her last name, but she's phenomenal. Her story she was like the first influencer, and she basically started doing it, and everyone was like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" And she was like, "No, this is going to be a thing," and now owns this like multi-million-dollar company. Oh, she's amazing.
What do you buy too much of?
Oh, what do
like
I
if someone was going to be, she's a financial literacy company CEO, wink, wink, and look at what she's spending money on.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely spend a lot of money on like health stuff. I like meals, like getting meals in or getting smoothies in, or like gym memberships, like all of the health stuff, like supplements. I'm all the green juices. I'm all about it, because when I feel good, my business does so much better. If I'm feeling sluggish and just, like I don't want to show up and be, my powerful self, then my business is not going to do as great. So that personally, absolutely that. And business wise, I invest in myself like crazy. I always have multiple mentors. I invest in my team. I am like I believe so full-heartedly that when you invest in yourself, like it comes back, like when you show up and invest in yourself. And also, I love hiring people. I think that is the coolest thing ever, of being like, they have a job because I followed my dream and created this job, right? Like it's mind-blowing to me. It's one of those things that I will never take for granted. I will never take for granted how cool that is, and just how my fiance always makes fun of me and says that I always have wow goggles on, because I'm always like, wow about everything.
That's the best. I love wow goggles. Yeah. That's so funny. But I have to agree with you on that, because, it was just this year that I quote unquote employed 2 people. And it's so funny how I can't even really say it because of the imposter syndrome still. I'm still like shaking that off. But the weird thing about it is that, I stay up all night. Like my energy is just through the roof, and it's rare. And it's because I love life, and I love what I do. And I always want to learn more. And I think when I'm in bed, the only thing about when you have people that you're quote unquote employing, or you've got something, you want to show up every single day for your best self, because you're not only showing up for yourself, you're showing up for them, and you want them to keep on your team, and it's pretty cool, because your fiance, you were supposed to be married like literally on Saturday. COVID, fuck off. Talk to me, because my husband is like my biggest cheerleader. How does it feel like to have him in your corner? And talk to me a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's the best person ever. He is like my other half. We spend especially now during COVID, we spend 100% of our time together basically. And I'll leave for 5 minutes and be like, oh, I miss you. I miss you already. And, but no, he is my absolute biggest cheerleader. Even when I was in a corporate job and doing my business as a side hustle, I would be, if someone said like, oh, what do you do? I would immediately be like, oh, I'm at this corporate job. I have this position. And he'd be like, tell me about your business. I'd be like, oh, I do this like little cool thing on this side. It's no big deal, right? I would downplay it so much, because I knew that if I told people I was in this corporate job, I would get praised for it. And I knew that if I told people, oh, I started this small business on financial literacy at 20 years old, they would tell me why it wouldn't work. And they would tell me, oh, what? You teach, how can you teach people when you're 20 and all this stuff? And so I told people what I knew would get me praise. And so he's always the one that's like, tell him. And he's just the best. So he is all team DTM.
I love that. Well, in terms of team DTM, what is the future? What do you think? If this is, because this is literally a time capsule. Yeah. It's the one thing I love about doing these podcasts is this is like, 40, 45 minutes to maybe sometimes an hour of your life. Yeah. And it's going to be in the universe, and you're going to be able to revisit it. Yeah. So give me a little time capsule jump in the next 5 years and then 10. What do you think?
This is my favorite question. So our goal, and I am a huge believer in calling your big shot, right? A lot of people are like, do it behind the scenes, then show people when you're done. I'm like, no, I'm going to call my big audacious goal, because I would rather fail in front of you and be like, that's okay. I'm okay with doing that, or being like, hey, I did it, and celebrate with you, right? So our goal is to be a $1 million business by next year, hit 7 figures, bringing $1 million in revenue in 2021, and then just grow. I mean, we are on a mission to just spread, right? More people need financial literacy. This needs to be taught in schools. This needs to be taught, parents need to know how to teach their kids, and we need to talk about it more, right? Especially one of the things I talk about a lot is because most of my clients are women, and I will say, talk about this at brunch. talk about this at brunch with your girlfriends, because nothing makes me more frustrated when I am out with a bunch of people and the guys, the men will be over here talking about finances and the women won't be, right? The conversation, and I'm like, why aren't we talking about money over here? Why do I have to go and join the men to have these conversations? Or I just made a podcast on this recently, but one of my really good friends from high school called me on the phone a couple months ago and said, hey, how's it going? What's up? Small talk. And then he said, so would you sell half of your company? I'm like, what are you no. And he's like, okay, 20%. Like, what would you, I want to buy a percentage. And I was like, no, like I'm not selling it. And he's like, okay, well, keep me in mind, because if you do, I want to be the first one on the docket. And I was like, I have never been asked questions like that from my female friends, like from women friends. And I told this story to a couple of my friends and they were like, oh my gosh, like I would totally love that. I'm like, but would you call me out of the blue and ask me that? Right. And so I'm just so passionate about more women just making this day-to-day conversation about money and what are your money goals and what are your huge money dreams and what are you doing financially and what's going on in our world that impacts you financially, and let's talk about the stimulus, like whatever. And so in 5 years, I mean, we want to be a multi-million-dollar company that reaches hundreds and thousands of people across we're already global, but just everywhere. And especially we want to do really, really big work in our youth of spreading financial literacy and teaching kids just the basics of, hey, did you know that it's free to open up a checking account? It's free to open up a savings account. And here's how you can start saving money for college. So that's an opportunity for you. And, all of these different things, that's such a huge, huge thing that we have coming in the next 5 years, 10 years. But yeah, this is my baby and we're like just warming up. It's so exciting.
Well, you give me goosebumps because literally the entire conversation, because for me, my advocacy really started to turn deeper when all of the George Floyd happening and the uprising came. And I was like, you know what? We need to educate and we need to help communities that right now, my brain the last couple of days have been trying to think about ways to get electronics like iPads or even just phones, but really iPads, to where in the next 2 years, we don't know what the schools are going to be like. And there's a lot of kids with families that don't have access to just computers. So, you and I will have to brainstorm. It's people like you that are really going to be wonderful allies to help push change from the outskirts, so that the soul communities that are suffering can really help raise up their communities. And it's an interesting way to have these conversations without forcing ourselves in and just throwing things and saying, do this, do that, do that. The way you talk and the way you communicate is just, from the bottom of my heart, you are such a light. And I want you to keep going, keep doing what you're doing. I'd love you to come back on the podcast. The more you, as my dog gets strangled. Here's Wayside Waves, like biggest advocate and dog. But seriously, I can feel it from you. You're something special. And this has been such a great conversation. And truthfully, we've only met in person twice. And I think you're going to be in my life for a while. So
oh my God, I better be. I'm going to fight to be in there.
I love it. Well, where can people find you? Obviously, there's the Deeper Than Money podcast, which I've been devouring. And it's like, it's manageable. Like mine is like 45, 50 minutes and you're like doing your makeup, cleaning your house. You can literally pop her on in the car and you can be driving from North to South Kansas City, or even just some of them are like nice little snippets of 8 minutes. And the advice, I was writing stuff down. I'm 43. This girl knows what she's talking about. So Where else can they find you?
For sure. Yeah, we are Deeper Than Money on basically every social media platform. If you search Deeper Than Money, we'll be there. Definitely on Instagram is where I love to hang out, but we also have a free Facebook group where I go live and do free coaching every single Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central. So definitely tune in. A lot of times when you're going to do this stuff, you'll get stuck, right? Like you'll be like, okay, I heard this advice on how to do this, and you start doing it and you get stuck. And so don't let getting stuck stop you. Come ask the follow-up questions, and we want to support that implementation. So the Facebook group is a great place to be, but really whatever social media platform you love, we'll be over there. Just search Deeper Than Money.
Chloe Elise, thank you for being a guest on my podcast. And thank you, viewers, again for another great episode of the Seraphine Podcast, in my opinion. See you guys later.